Welcome back to the Michigan Business Beat on the Michigan Business Network. I'm Chris Holman, and we are at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, and we're here because the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce puts on their annual policy conference here every year. And who is more important to Detroit and the state of Michigan than consumers' energy, right? Come on. All right, so we got Rejji Hayes here, who is the CFO, and I always feel like opening this. Show me the money, Rejji. I mean, how are things at Consumers Energy?
Oh, Chris, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I'd say things at Consumers Energy are really quite good. We're working very hard to make our electric grid more reliable, more resilient, so it can withstand the weather of today and tomorrow that we
Yeah.
anticipate, because we're certainly seeing higher wind speeds. And so we're trying to fix the system so it's more reliable, and we're seeing good results. We're also trying to build up enough supply to meet the power needs of these really neat sectors that are looking at Michigan. So whether it's data centers, whether it's semiconductor, fabs and other types of industrial businesses. We're really trying to power the energy needs of tomorrow with a lot of these fascinating companies that are coming to Michigan, and obviously keeping rates affordable for customers. That's what we're really focused on.
Well, it's kind of interesting because there's two things there that people don't think about much, and one of them is who's eating the energy these days. I mean, it used to be okay, it's General Motors, it's Ford, it's Chrysler, it's whoever. It's not anymore.
Now, we're in a really unique period where we're seeing levels of power demand that we have not seen really since post World War II. You could even say going back to the Industrial Revolution. And it's really driven by two primary factors. One, data center proliferation. And so we're seeing, because of artificial intelligence, generation artificial intelligence, as well as just cloud computing needs, we're seeing a lot of these data centers, which are very energy intensive businesses, prop up throughout the country. And so Michigan, again, is a pretty highly coveted state for data centers. So that's one big driver of demand. The other one is industrial reshoring, and that's driven by a couple things. One, a lot of the legislation passed over the last 3 to 4 years at the federal level, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that's catalyzed a lot of reshoring or industrial build out in the US. And then obviously with the geopolitical tension with China, a lot of diversified industrial companies have started to decouple from China really over the last several years and come back to the US. And so those two big drivers are really driving a lot of energy demand, and we're trying to power those needs for all those potential customers.
The other thing that I was going to get to is where the energy's coming from because it used to be big coal piles, right? And now we're looking at a lot of different sources.
Absolutely. We have certainly invested heavily in gas generation. We bought a gas plant 2 years ago, our covert generating unit, which is over a gigawatt of capacity. And we have our Zeeland and Jackson plants, which we've owned for many years. And it is all an all of the above approach. And so we've also invested heavily in solar generation as well as wind generation. And we'll continue to build out those resources. So solar, wind, gas generation. It's really all of the above.
You guys have also opened a department that audits. So you can have someone come into your house or your business and say, how do we get more energy efficient?
That's a great comment, because we really don't talk enough about our energy waste reduction, or what we also refer to as our energy efficiency programs, where we spend a lot of time explaining largely to our residential customers, but we also have commercial and industrial programs where we explain to them how they can use consumed power, whether it's electrons or natural gas, more efficiently in their house. In the context of natural gas, it's is your house well insulated for home heating? Because that can waste a lot of dollars if it's not well insulated. With respect to electricity consumption, how can you make sure that your house is utilizing the air conditioning and taking advantage of having the right cooling temperature and charging your vehicle at the right time of day? If you have an electric vehicle, that's another program we have as well. And so energy efficiency programs are also vital to our making sure we have enough energy supply, because we always say the best plant is the one you don't have to build. And
Yeah.
with these programs and people using power more efficiently, we actually don't have to build more supply if people do heat their homes or energize their homes or their vehicles in the most efficient way.
It's kind of interesting because I still am not sure I understand what a barometer does. And so I'm not sure that people totally understand peak hours,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of energy consumption.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, you still cannot store electrons at a reasonable cost for a sufficient amount of time in mass quantities. And so because of that, you need to have a constant balance between supply and demand. And when you look at the demand curve or the usage of power, really in the Midwest, it almost looks like an EKG reading where it's flat for most of the year. And then when we have those hot summers, you see a peak in the
Yeah.
demand curve. And so because we can't store electrons yet, for sufficient amount of time at a reasonable cost and in mass quantities, we actually have to have enough supply to meet that peak for the handful of days it occurs once a year. And so that's a very inefficient way to provide power. So over time, hopefully storage evolves, but until then, you have to have basically a constant equilibrium between supply and demand. And again, that has to meet that peak need the handful of days a year where we hit those peaks in the summer.
Well, and it's education of people like me. So, Rejji, thanks so much for being here. Rejji Hayes, the CFO of Consumers Energy, and the people who bring you power, but also will help you be more efficient. You're watching the Michigan Business Beat on the Michigan Business Network. I'm Chris Holman, coming to you from the Grand Hotel and the Mackinac Policy Conference.